Okay, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Thank you guys for coming. Just some reminders about the meeting in general is that this is actually a joint tourism committee meeting. And so we will be holding the meeting. I think there will be time for conversation, and at that time, we will call on you. Please no outbursts and stuff. We are going to go around our inner circle here and introduce ourselves. This is Stephanie Lillard from the VTC, but we'll start down there with Taryn.
I'm Taryn Logan. I'm the county representative on the committee.
I'm Gary Green. I'm the owner of Mountain Trails on Main Street.
Mary Barrett, Holiday Inn, Front Row.
Carrie Barnhart, Front Row Brewing Company and Vibe Properties.
I'm Mabe. I'm with the Board of Supervisors.
Katie Toole with the Apple House.
Nikki Foster with the Front Royal Warren County Chamber of Commerce.
Billy Clifton with Sunflower Cottage Herb Farm and Backroom Brewery.
Richard Runyon, Shenandoah Valley Golf Club.
Thank you guys for coming today. Stephanie, I'm going to turn it over to you. I think you've been in talks with Nikki and Taryn.
Yeah. And just a little recap of the last meeting, just so everybody knows. We had discussed, we were wanting to get an idea of what different jurisdictions in Virginia were doing as far as tourism, whether they were government ran or privately ran. So that's where we thought Stephanie could shed some light, and any other advice you have.
And you can tell them what the VTC is, not everybody probably knows.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity to be here. And so my name is Stephanie Lillard, and I reside in the Ray Page. That's where I work from. And VTC is Virginia Tourism Corporation. I'm a development specialist, and I work serving the northern Shenandoah Valley and parts of northern Virginia and areas in central Virginia. So I have 12 counties and 2 cities that I cover. And so part of my job is working with the communities, primarily what we call the DMO. So DMO stands for Designated Marketing Organization. And that designation is a designation that is decided at the local level and acknowledged by the state. So we at Virginia Tourism consider that our main point of contact for all things tourism in communities. And so yes, Nikki and I had a conversation a few weeks ago, and she had kind of got me up to speed on some of the discussions that you guys are having. And I understand that it's somewhat of a transitional period here. And so while on the agenda it says presentation, if it's okay, I'll just kind of speak freely, if you will, as a follow-up to our conversation. And one of those questions during our conversation was about what standard practice or best practice, if you will, does Virginia tourism support and or encourage around the state for tourism operations. And what I'll share with you is that there is no one size fits all. We in Virginia Tourism do not go into communities and say, this is how your tourism department and or organizations should function or what it should look like. We are very sensitive to, the fact that the economic landscape looks differently, from one county to the next, and that includes funding for those operations. I will say that, again, I have 12 counties and 2 cities, and within that breach, for my service area, the majority of those do operate through the government body. There is one organization that it operates through the Chamber of Commerce, and they have a tourism council, so it would be similar to the group of folks that are around the table today. They are an advisory board, and they assist the staff with making decisions on how to spend the tourism dollars. Their funding is received from the county government, which is primarily made up of transient occupancy tax, so in short, TOT, which is a lodging tax that's collected by the county. And in addition to that, the Chamber and the Tourism Council, they sell ads for the Visitor's Guide, they do events, there's a number of private fundraising they do and are able to do because they are a 501c3. And so the others, so that's one of the 14, if you will. The others are operating through either the town and or county government, and their funding is received, as allocations through either general fund or again through meals tax, lodging tax, etc. That's only for my service area. We have 6 specialists, again, that's my title, I'm a development specialist, around the state for Virginia tourism, and I've spoke a little bit with those colleagues to try to see and glean from them how their DMOs operate. And I found it to be very similar to, that of my service area, and that Southwest Virginia, for example, it's 19 counties and 4 cities. Of those localities, only 3 operate outside of a government structure. And so today, after we've had some discussion, what I can do, if you'd be interested, is I can leave back some, or follow up with some contact information for if you would like to speak with, some of those that are operating either through a nonprofit or through a chamber of commerce, to kind of hear from them, what their experience has been, the advantages, the disadvantages, and the opportunities. The benefit, if you will, to having it outside of a government structure is that there is a certain amount, I guess, of flexibility that the organization would have, particularly when you talk about fundraising, donations, looking at events and thinking about the risk that is assumed with public events for fundraising. So there's a lot of considerations as to, that when you're talking about, do we keep this in-house in a government, or do we, stand up a 501c3 or again, have it administered through our Chamber of Commerce, our being your. The funding, again, like I said, I know that was one of the things that we had talked about as far as, is there an equation, if you will, or a math, and again, at the state level, there is not, and for many reasons, as I mentioned earlier, the funding for tourism operations by locality looks different. To just earlier this morning, in fact, was in the city of Stanton and spending some time with them, and their transient occupancy tax rate is 6.7. Well, in Page County, it's 5%. I'm not sure, what the rate is here, but
It's 5, Mary, it's 5 here too, right? Yeah, 5.
yeah, and so and then looking at those other revenue streams, not everyone collects the same as far as meals and retail, and so there's a lot at play there. Is there anything I'm missing that we chatted about?
So in your service district, do you have any models where there's a town and a county, and that there's like 2 pools of money that are being put together for the overall effort?
Yes, so, where I reside, Delores Page. So again, they operate through the Chamber of Commerce and Visitor Center. Right. So both of those organizations, they're sharing a home, but they operate differently. Their funding, as I mentioned earlier, does come through the county for the tourism occupancy or transient occupancy tax, but all 3 towns, the town of Delores, the town of Shenandoah, and the town of Stanley, all do contribute at a much lesser, amount. But a lot of that too is driven by, again, what the tax revenue is in those communities. When I pulled in, actually, I was talking to our development specialist on the Eastern Shore, and she has several different models. In fact, the town who they're the designated Virginia Main Street, and they're the seat for the county. They actually contribute, and they contribute funding for the program, and they also administer the the tourism department program. So, but yes, ma'am, they often, it's not uncommon to see partnerships between town and county, and historically we have found the ones who have that type of partnership work very well. It is essential that naturally you have that MOU in advance, and there is a collective understanding and some accountability measures in place for performance and so forth.
Anybody else have questions for Stephanie?
Find my questions. I was
Here, has questions.
What are the types of visitor center accreditations that are out there, and what does our visitor center, if you could explain a little bit more about our accreditation, and what that is required of that.
Yes, ma'am. So in order for Virginia Tourism to recognize your visitor center as a certified visitors bureau, there is a very prescribed, if you will, list of requirements, which I'm not prepared to, that being said, I can follow up in an email and share that. It's very specific and short. But in order for us to continue to acknowledge your visitor, that you have to stay, and it is being ADA compliant. So you have to be open 7 days a week. I'm trying to think. Well, a DMO, you have to have be appointed as a designated marketing organization. I do not. I'll have to look, but I'm not sure there is a requirement in there as it pertains to, where the funding is derived from or anything like that. Nikki, do you know is there any more?
No, I mean, short of, you said 7 days a week, and that means, I think it's 362 days a year that it has to be open.
That's right, yes, and also, it does not dictate in there, or does not, there is no requirement as to whether it's volunteer or if it's paid staffing. Many of the CVB, Certified Visitors Bureaus, so CVB, you like our acronyms, are in fact operated by volunteers. So typically it is common that you would have one paid staff, maybe a couple part-time, you can afford that, but majority of them are operated by volunteers.
When you look at all of the other jurisdictions, could you suggest to us ones that are very similar to us in terms of size and also destination quality, I guess, in terms of all we have to offer here in Warren County and Front Royal?
I would be happy to provide a short list to Nikki based on your population and the landscape. Yeah, I can do that.
That would be helpful.
Only looking at those two factors, not so much as your tourism assets, because that's kind of
right.
Right.
Another question. I'm the one with all the questions. So I have done some research across the country actually, and looked at different programs that were similar in Front Royal, what they have to offer. And I got some information from the Destination Marketing Association, Travel and Tourism Research Association, and the U.S. Travel Association. And some of the information would point to the three main types of structures. And the first being a city department, which you've talked about.
Yes.
Standalone nonprofit agency, which you talked about, and then Chamber of Commerce being the third. When they listed these, they had mentioned, and they don't provide numbers here, but they had mentioned that the city department was the least common amongst all of those. And is Virginia different in that, in terms of the rest of the country has, more prevalence with that, or, and is there a reason to go for one model versus another model based on how you're making, kind of the landscape?
Yeah, so no ma'am, and so that was, initially when I started, the point that I was trying to make is that we acknowledge all three,
Right.
and we have observed that all three, in fact, have been successful across the state.
Right.
If I understand your question correctly, we have not taken a stance in saying that one is more popular and is more fruitful or successful than the other. Am I answering
Right,
your-
and then also if there's, when I called Sedona, Arizona, which I always thought Sedona was much larger than us, but they actually have less residents than we do, which I was surprised at, but much heavier tourism. They're very much a destination market. And I was really surprised at how many chambers are out there, because my initial reaction to a chamber being involved in the tourism was very negative. And I was surprised at how many jurisdictions have that model. They have that model, and it seems to work for them. But
They have the chamber operates as the visitors,
Yeah.
as the destination marketing.
And what they had said was, the more that you are a destination, the more likely you are to have a chamber model. And the reason for that is because the businesses, and I don't know where we stand in terms of some of the things I'm trying to figure out is tourism our number one industry? And no one seems to know that, so we're kind of backwards because we don't know the answer to that. I think it is. It brings in, over 100 million, I think. And so I don't know what other industries in Warren County bring in that kind of money. So what they said was, the woman from Sedona, who's also speaks on the topic, and she was very gracious in providing me a lot of information. She said, the more it is your number one industry, the more likely you are to have a chamber model, because the businesses within the county or within the city, and they have a county-city structure as well, are often tourism businesses as well. So your chamber is helping to attract tourism businesses, to support tourism businesses, and also there's a lot of synergy in what they produce in terms of the materials that they produce, in terms of the help that they give. She had some other kind of rules around that, being that you have to have, kind of strict financial separation of the two. You have to have, transparency. And if you go on their website, they had everything on the website. It's really great, including their contract, by the way, which is great. But so I was interested in if there are kind of rules like that you look at, if you look like one type of destination, or does one model serve you better than another model? Because that's what she was seeming to suggest, which I was really surprised at. I had no idea that chambers, where I came from, chambers were not involved in tourism as far as I know, but I didn't know that much about tourism, but I didn't think that they were.
So in that all of that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's logic there,
Yeah.
and it's understandable. I will share with you that often one of the arguments that you might hear, or concerns with a chamber serving as the main tourism, is that chambers of commerce are very heavily, they are driven when you look at their mission, and at the end of the day, what they are there to serve the members, the paying members. Whereas with often one would argue with a tourism council or underneath of the government structure, it's that it is promoting all businesses in the industry, secondary to that, without having to pay a due, if you will, right? Also with the Chamber of Commerce, it often is very business to business, not business to consumer or or visitor, and so the marketing, so there's two ways you can look at it from a marketing perspective. I mean, a lot of what in the tourism industry, when we say what consumes the time of a tourism professional, what really is identifying who the target audience is, where they're coming from, telling your story, and then identifying what vehicles you're going to use to deliver that story to reach that target audience. I mean, a tourism professional, that largely is what they are doing, is marketing their community as a destination for the visitor.
Right.
The visitor being 50 miles outside of, 50 mile radius, outside of the 50 mile radius rather, okay? And so, whereas with chambers, a lot of times it's very heavily focused on, kind of entrepreneurial development, product development, program development, where you are, empowering and fostering business growth, business retention, etc., which absolutely includes tourism-based businesses. And that marketing generally tends to be, again, the effort with the staff of a Chamber of Commerce. It is designing the events where it is networking and, developing a business plan and cash flow and marketing from a brand perspective. And, it looks different. And so, I think just thinking organizationally how they operate and how their time is spent, that might help you all too, to thinking forward, right? Like what makes sense for Front Royal, Warren County. I know, I realize I'm not giving you a very direct, but they're just.
it's helpful.
Yeah, if it existed and I knew that it did, I would. But, just these are some perspectives and things to think about. But I hear you, and as to whether or not it is your number one, I mean, it certainly is a leading industry for the county and the town, if not number one. And I mean, there's data there to be found to answer that. If you don't have it.
Where do we find that?
So if the government, if your local government does not have that, you should contact Brandon at the regional PDC, the Northern Shenandoah Valley Regional Planning District, and they will be able to get you some statistics, that's put out every 10 years or 5 years. I mean, those, but it'll show you your top
From a
number.
revenue perspective or an employer perspective, or both?
Both.
Okay,
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
good,
Yeah.
that would be really helpful.
Yes, ma'am. And so you'll be able to see on there the leading industries, the top employers, et cetera.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
great,
ma'am.
that's what we're looking for.
And it should be, some of that information, when's the last time that the county or town updated their comprehensive plan?
That's 20 years.
Okay.
We're starting.
Okay, so there should be some information in your comprehensive plan,
It's a little.
but it's gonna be dated.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the issue, unless the locality
We can
invests
find
in.
demographic information.
Right. So unless you're doing your own studies in the interim, which many aren't, they just don't have the financial,
It's actually pretty good.
Right, so another question related to authorities. So I noticed that across the country, there are other ones that, including Asheville, which was another place that I was really interested in because we have a lot of things in common with Asheville. Outdoor destination, we kind of a natural environment, the whole bit. And we would love, I think the potential here could be something like in Asheville with the restaurants and the breweries and wineries and everything that we have here. So Asheville is structured in something they call an authority. Let's see, a tourism development authority. And they have a board where they have 4 members are named by the Asheville City Council, 4 by the county. They have 1 by the Chamber of Commerce, not dissimilar to our board, 1 county supervisor, 1 town council member. 6 of them represent hotels, 3 of them represent non-hotels, so pretty similar. But then they run everything through this, it's almost like a corporation, almost this authority, not dissimilar to our EDA, but that's not necessarily where we want to go, but it's an authority, so then they run everything through that and they manage it through that. Do we have examples of tourism development authorities in Virginia, and what has been your experience with them?
I do not have any personal or professional experience with tourism authority. Aside now, Virginia Tourism, we are a tourism authority.
That's
yes,
a great
yes,
example.
Yeah. So that would be the extent of my.
Yeah.
But I'm a bit above my pay grade, because I'm not in an executive office anymore. But if you all were interested in entertaining that, you mentioned about your EDA. I mean, it is very much mandated by the local government. That would be your own. You all would, the county, town, stand that up on your own, right?
That's right.
And they would absolutely then be the conduit or fiscal agent. And so I will have to ask my colleagues if, as of now, I can tell you just in the conversations that I've had with them, and this has been an ongoing conversation for several months now in many communities across the Commonwealth, not just here. But I have not heard any.
Everybody works
Florida,
through this issue.
they're kind of like, do we need DMOs, right? But I will tell you that this discussion has not come up in our discussion, rather, that any of their DMO offices operate as an authority. That's not to say they don't, but this, it's not been So, but like I said, I will follow up with them and see if I can find some good examples, if there is an example. And if there is, and they're good examples I think might be valuable, I'll pass that on to Nikki and she can share it with the group.
Then there's another model that I saw that acts more like it's somewhat of an authority too, but what they do is they provide, actually it's the city, and they provide more just grants. And so whoever tourism related, including things like the library, it has to be a nonprofit. They will provide grants to anybody who does tourism related stuff. So they're kind of hands off, it's decentralized. They have a strategy and they say, can you do this type of thing, kind of like the government, the federal government does, and say, here's grant money that's available, and you grab the grant money, and it can be a Main Street Association, it can be a library, it can be the chamber, it can be whomever bids on those grants, and it's a way to manage the tourism money. They just send it all out, and the idea is that in total, you'll get community involvement and you'll get tourism, but again, it's a little bit more decentralized. Do you see any models like that where it's through the city, but it's in a grant program, more than a managed tourism center?
So that transient occupancy tax, there are counties that they will not simply say, okay, for round figures.
Yeah.
We have $500,000 in transient occupancy tax that, we will send directly to the DMO. There are some that will say, we will give you 50% of that $500,000, and then the other 50 they will open it up for they will send out. There's a very formal request for funding that has to be completed by, like you said, it could be the ball team or the library, etc. And then they submit those requests through the Department of Finance at the county, and then the Board of Supervisors then is who entertains those requests and determines how they're going to allocate the remainder of those funds. And that actually is something that in Luray Page, the DMO there does not receive 100% of that occupancy tax. They receive, a certain percentage of it every year, and then the remainder is made available, for the local farm program has been a recipient, the Luray Triathlon. There's been, a number of recipients that come in. They have to, though, prove the tie, the connection to the industry, and what they're doing to increase tourism in the county, and yes, with a conversion, how they'll be able to show that, demonstrate that.
Okay. I have more questions, but let everybody else talk.
Those are very good questions.
Keep going.
We
You
were
want to
like,
keep going?
We're all looking.
Yeah, right.
Might as well let everybody hear it.
Yeah. Okay.
You can email me those questions in advance next time.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm kidding.
I have a question on metrics. So one of the things I've been looking at, and again, that information is out there in terms of all the potential metrics you have. When I did the research here, I went to the visitor center. I actually went to the chamber, talked to Nikki. I went to talk to Matt, I've been involved with Taryn here. I've been involved in this program for a while. One of the things we don't really have is a lot of good metrics. We do have metrics. They're not always followed in terms of by the leadership is not always that interested in it, or isn't saying that's how I'm holding you accountable or the performance. So we have some social media metrics, we have some website metrics, but the interest in that is very low. So it's not for lack of trying, but it's not a strategic plan with metrics, performance metrics associated with it. So when I think metrics are really important for performance. And so when I was looking at the different metrics for an organization, things like the marketing plan came up, the lodging tax, an increase in the lodging tax, which would mean increase in, utilization of hotels or an increase in hotels, an increase in meals tax, even though the meals tax wasn't funding it, but they thought that was tied closely to tourism. The visitors to certain attractions, so for here it would be like park service visitors at the front Royal entrance would be kind of indicative of our tourism here. Earned media, website, mobile, social analytics, business survey, which you would ask the businesses, what do you think about the tourism and how whether you're representing our county and town well, and increase in tourist-related business revenue. So these are just some of the things that I saw that were kind of the big hits. Are there other ones that you know of that you think are good, or ones that we can easily get access to? Some of these are, I think, hard for us to know where to find them. But are there other ones that you know of that people are using that are common?
I believe, honestly, you've done a very good job of summarizing that. And those are the kind of key performance indicators when you're looking at communities, so we do offer that marketing leverage program grant. And that is very much more, we want to know, right, how are you measuring the success of your campaigns and, the monies that we are in fact granting to you for the purposes of marketing your community as a destination. And that, right, I mean, everything you just mentioned is what we are looking for and generally what we see. I don't know, nothing comes to mind right now, sitting here, hearing you with that list, as something that you're missing. I mean, yes, your emissions, do you all have emissions tax? But I mean, just looking at the numbers for the Cheryl National Park or your caverns, and I mean, that's, you're doing it, that's it.
And
Yes,
State
yes.
parks and
And
all.
then your lodging and meals and, again, all those things. And then your social media, those ads, things that you're running and seeing, right, what your the analytics are and how they're performing. And
then I would
very-
assume whether it is either the city or the contracted service, that those metrics would be reported and people would care about them, and they'd be reported on a quarterly basis, on an annual basis, particularly if it's a renewable contract, whether it's an employee or it's also the organization that you've outsourced to.
Yeah, so I mean, it's good business practice regardless of what, right, like whether it's tourism or what industry, but yes, ma'am, you're right. And then, and the elected officials, I mean, it's being good stewards of the tax dollar money. And so, right, that absolutely is something that should be reported on and being looked at in year over year, making sure that those monies are being invested wisely, because you should continue to see an increase. And in the event that you're not seeing an increase, aside from an economic recession, it does beg the question then if you need to, reassess how those dollars are being spent. And
Right,
so
you're not
then,
getting a return.
yes, ma'am. And then also, and I believe you did mention, but the visitor center, looking at the traffic, I mean, I suspect there's some type of an intake, from, phone calls, things of that nature. And so, and I will just, while I mention that, we cannot stress enough how important it is for a community to have a visitor center. That is one thing that definitively I will say, we in Virginia Tourism believe that every community should have. I mean, that's your front line, right? They are there to greet your visitor and to tell them all the great things that you have to offer and the experiences to be had, and to champion them to come back and to bring their friends and family, etc.
And most of these models that were real true destinations, they had a visitor center in every case.
And it's also right in having them and making sure that there are there's processes in place for the visitor intake, right, so that they can perhaps do that follow up with surveys and why you were here and what did you do, and you can glean a certain amount of information, that data, from those surveys are tough, right? We all know that. I can respect them more now being in this profession than ever. I'm always taking the time to do those because I now understand the value more. But trying to collect that, or encouraging the visitors when they come back and see us before you leave town, because we want to hear more about your time with us, and then documenting all of that information so that when it comes time for budget season or those reports to the elected officials.
Right.
You can provide that, yes, ma'am.
Right, and
it's just good practice.
to the businesses, because
Yes, right. Yes, ma'am. Particularly if it is a chamber of commerce structure and they're paying.
Right.
I mean, that's even more reason. Yes, ma'am.
So, do you see any models? And I did see some models out there where there is actually a charge, a kind of a matching charge for the businesses. So you get a certain minimum level of services for tourism, but then they ask the businesses, if you want this extra level, like to be listed in the brochure or to be listed online or to whatever, that you would pay an extra level. So you have, the basic service, and then there's a payment for tourist-related businesses that want extra. Did you see are there any models like that you know of?
Yes, ma'am. when the kind of the way the structure is like classes, so you've got like a class 1, a class 2, a class 3, being tourism member, and with that, right, comes an extra layer of services or benefits, if you will, and yes, that is a practice that I know there are a few.
Is it common
Delores
or?
Chamber. Not through, I would say not through the ones that are operating
Through the
as
city,
government.
yeah.
But for the ones that are operating as nonprofit or through Chamber of Commerce, yes ma'am, that's where you would see that being a more common practice.
Okay. What else do I have here? And by the way, when I talk about metrics, there are metrics around, but I think if they're not in a coordinated package, nor from a leadership perspective, does everybody care about them or know about them. So I think that's important to mention, because they're not really that useful unless you're holding people accountable to them. So
Right, and there's more than one reason, not just, for the discussion today, but I mean, thinking it's particularly, with the Chamber or your Economic Development Office, for the sake of, trying to encourage business and new product development. Listen, if you're coming to me and you're saying, oh, we have this vacant building downtown and we really have a need for a coffee house or a brewery or something that would complement the industry, I'm right at the gate. I'm gonna say, besides what's the price, right? It's also gonna be, I need to see those statistics. I want to see what the community is doing. Prove to me, right, that it's gonna be a good return on my investment if I purchase this property and start this business. And so, just thinking from that perspective as well. Yes, ma'am.
how often do you see that when it's a city structure, even if it's an authority, it connected to the Economic Development Authority, those two tourism connected?
Yes, so not necessarily, sometimes there seems to be a common misperception that the Economic Development Authority is the county and or town or city government economic development office, and those are often not one and the same.
Right.
It is common that tourism in a government structure, that the Office of Tourism lives under the Office of Economic Development.
The city office of economic
The city, the
development.
town, or the
Yeah,
county.
right.
Yes, not under the Economic Development Authority.
Yeah.
Because that generally is separate of.
Got it.
Yes, ma'am. And so that is not uncommon. It serves under the Community Development Office or under the Office of Economic Development. And then sometimes it's just a Department of Tourism. I know in Virginia Beach they have a Department of Ag, and I think even in Loudoun County, I think Ag and Tourism work together. So so that looks again different in every community, but certainly common.
You talked about a convention visitors bureau. What are the parameters? What's the definition of convention visitors?
A CVB,
Yeah,
Certified
CVB.
Visitors Bureau.
Certified
Yes,
visitors.
right,
Because
yes.
there's another term, CVB, convention visitors bureau. Is there not?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Within our organization, Virginia Tourism, we recognize, and our certification is the Certified Visitors Bureau.
Okay.
Yes.
And is that what we have here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The BTC grants, I assume that there are grants associated with tourism. How often do they go to the particular, do they go to the city offices? Do they go to the chamber? How are they dispersed, and do we take good advantage of those grants?
So, and thank you for that question particularly. So in order to be eligible for our Marketing Leverage Program grant, there needs to be a DMO, an appointed designated marketing organization.
That's right.
And that can be the chamber, it could be this
One of these
board, if you
structures,
establish
yeah.
yourself as a nonprofit, and or it could be the town or county government. Historically, again, I can run a report and let you know how many years that this community has been the recipient of that. I will say that in my tenure with Virginia Tourism, which has only been just over 2 years, Front Rural Warren County has been a regional player and applicant successfully. for those grants. So with the Shenandoah Spirits Trail and also with the Shenandoah Valley Tourism Partnership, they have been a partner and recipient for those regional grants. Just like I said, in the 2 years. Prior to that, I would have to run a query to see.
Well, I know our
if that-
Appaloosa Festival has been a recipient for a couple of years in a row of the Music Lovers.
That's
Grant.
right, yeah, that is a different grant, and we no longer offer those grants, unfortunately. But yes, you're right, again, we used to have, a music festival sponsorship grant. And yes, they were successful year over year. And, in that case, when that program existed, the DMO did not necessarily have to be a partner, but they did need to be, recognized, organized, and acknowledged on the application for Appaloosa to even make an application. So there is an advantage, even if the DMO office itself is not going to be an applicant, they exist so that they can allow other entities within your community to be an applicant.
Are there other accreditations besides the accreditations that you provide, that other organizations provide that you would recommend or that you think are important for a city or a chamber or an authority?
Accreditations for the tourism office outside of what Virginia Tourism offers,
Yeah.
not that comes to mind, you know.
That's about it for me.
Not anything that comes to mind.
Who does have questions?
I'm still writing my notes.
Stephanie, I know when we talked on the phone, beyond this process, there's the possibility of maybe, because we talked about, defining our customer and, all of those things that we want to do. So there is some assistance that we could get from VTC to potentially do some of that work.
Yes, ma'am. So through my role and then my colleagues in Richmond, we work with communities to facilitate discussion within the community with stakeholders to assess. To at the end of the day, what we will leave you with is a tourism development plan. And part of that is going to identify, yes, who your target audience is. Looking at the service area, kind of your marketing service area, looking at your, as I mentioned earlier, the tools that are then there and makes, they're feasible for getting your story out there to that audience, reaching them. And then part of it too is doing an inventory of your current tourism assets, identifying those gaps, and then kind of forming, some goals, short-term, long-term, for product development. And we are preparing in June, we have been working on updating our statewide tourism plan. So Front Rural Warren County was a participant of the original drive, what we call drive tourism. So 5 years ago, it was our statewide tourism plan. And that program, again, we called it drive tourism. Front Rural Warren County, they were a participant. And so this year for the Drive 2.0, there will be an opportunity to over a couple dozen communities to participate. They'll be eligible to participate in the program, and there will be funding attached to that. At this time, I'm not sure. We're still kind of working out some of the details, whether it'll be a competitive process or if it'll be like a first come, first serve. But the outcome of that would absolutely be where we would work in the community. We would host a workshop, and you would either focus on telling your story, building a case for tourism, advocacy, or product, looking at product development. And so, kind of stay tuned for those dates. Hopefully, we'll have an announcement sooner rather than later. But like I said, it'll be in the month of June. And then looking forward after that, I mean, again, I'm 5 days a week, really truly 7, because my cell phone never gets turned off. Here, I'm happy to meet with any groups, regardless of size, to have conversations like this and to kind of just be working towards, a larger goal.
Are there charges for that?
No, ma'am. Your taxes pay for that.
Seems bad, but you never know.
No, but we are not professional consultants, right? There's a difference between what we are, versus going out and working with some of these larger agencies who work in and do your comprehensive, planning. That's not what we
We
do.
do that in-house.
Yes, okay, wow. But yes, and we can work with you. And then also, once you transition and figure out what, this organization, who's gonna be your lead for tourism and, following that, absolutely, you should have an internal, there should be a plan, right, a working document. And I can meet with you, and I'm happy to bring folks from our brand department or our public relations team, et cetera, and to have some discussions about looking at some co-op marketing that you can do with us in Virginia Tourism at a reduced cost. Looking at your social media and those campaigns, and again, we've got some buy-down opportunities or rebate some rebating that we can do for that. There are a number of things we can bring to the table.
I'm done.
Well, thank you, Stephanie, for coming. We really appreciate your knowledge and
pleasure.
information, and thank you, Carrie, for all your questions. I think now we had talked about trying to create some potential options for tourism. We've had a lot of conversations and such, and I think now we were kind of like, what do we do now? What are some ideas that we have? I think Stephanie kind of touched on it and carried it, as well as the 3 different versions as far as government, chamber, nonprofit. So I think we talked about, when we met a little bit yesterday, like some pros and cons of each. Is that where we want to go from there?
I think so. I think of those 3, we owe a presentation to the town council. And I think while we can't make a solid recommendation here, we can provide pros and cons on the options. I think doing the staff work to understand and go through what we've learned is important for making that decision and not making it quickly. So I know that of the 3 models we talked about, the one being the city model, or whether you're a town, city, or a county, we heard some pluses and minuses. What do we want to talk about in terms of the pluses and minuses that we believe, what you've heard, what we want to list? Thoughts about this? Are you guys have to talk?
Yeah.
Processing.
Yeah.
Pluses? You want to talk about the pluses of being?
I think your pluses, one of them is that there's no membership involved.
Okay. So in no membership, are you saying also that there's perceived equity in that?
And I think another plus is accessibility and accountability. There's that closeness, just physical closeness. People who live here and are part of the community.
This is if city runs it, right?
Yeah.
So isn't a con the dissension between county and county?
Didn't know we were on cons yet.
Throwing it out.
Yeah. I'll put it down here.
I like the pros.
Yeah, and what was really interesting, no matter where I looked, that existed.
Yeah.
And the smaller the county and city, where the city or the town was the seat and they didn't have much else beyond those borders, the more the conflict. So that, I think we're very similar in that way.
Somehow that's comforting.
Yeah, no. So now it's comforting.
I think, if I may, I will say that, with that, you are right, and I worked at the local level prior to this, and I felt often it was a very daunting task between town and county and trying to, it was a lot of play there. And then my transition to the state, and now having had the opportunity to travel the state, while I have, these communities I mentioned to you, I've spent quite a bit of time in all of, the communities across the state, or majority. Yeah, absolutely, you're not one. I would just say though that what we try to stress at the state is that the communities understand tourism really is, at the end of the day, it is very regional, because rarely is it, think about you as a consumer and when you're picking a place to go for vacation, right? Like, I'm going to the beach, or here, like it's Shenandoah Valley often. It's not, I'm going to the town of Front Royal, or me and my family are going to the town of, Luray, or the city of Winchester. It is generally a much more like holistic approach, right? Like looking much larger. And so that encompasses city, town, county, etc. And so while I know sometimes it can be burdensome and challenging to try to see past your differences, it's imperative really that you understand the necessity of, having healthy conversation and frequent conversation as well, and working together for the greater good.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons we think the money should be pooled in some way, and there should be oversight in some way, because it's not a ton
There
of
has
money.
to be
Yeah,
accountability.
accountability,
There has to be accountability.
and also we have to make those dollars stretch as far as we can stretch
Because we're
them.
spending everybody's money in this room.
Right,
Right.
yeah.
So, and I think that's a discussion that we need to have as a board, where we present to the town council and the board of supervisors
Yeah.
a plan.
Yeah.
I don't think we can, it's great to have you here, because you've given us a lot of information to go off of, but I think it's our responsibilities to take our time with this, not push it, not run it down somebody's throat, drive it through, and present it accordingly, not today.
Yep.
But take the notes, go back, and we come up with a couple plans and submit it, and it's up to the town and the county to agree.
Right.
And I'll tell you one thing I like, is seeing this much engagement. I'm glad we stirred the pot so much all of you are here. Right? Because if you didn't care, you wouldn't be here. So, that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Okay, any other pluses on the city? All right, minuses, we have the dissension. Any other minuses? I think there's a general minus of, this is not to insult people who work in county governments or at all, but sometimes governments don't always produce product as well as specialists do, because they have multiple priorities. And so I think that, not to say you can't.
Subject matter experts.
Right. They're not the subject matter experts. They're not a leader in that particular tourism, whereas, in tourism or whatever it is. And sometimes that's a reason to look at another option. Doesn't mean it can't be mitigated against, but I sometimes think that's an issue with the downside. The second model, this is a model that would be to a 501c6, a visitors corporation, not the chamber. The chamber is also a 501c6 as well, but to some other entity. A question I would have for you is, what typically is the other entity? Is it a neighborhood association, a city association, a Main Street association? What is the other entity? A marketing company? That if it's not a chamber, who else is outsourced? Who else is the tourism outsourced to?
So you generally, I would say, again, just from what I've observed in my role and more so even outside of my regions, when we see that, it's regional tourism groups, not, because if it's gonna be, local to the community, it generally is through like your town.
Either the
county
chamber
government
or
or
the-
the chamber,
okay.
yeah, or the chamber, again, with the Visitors Bureau though, and having staff acting as the tourism staff. But with if you were to go that route, however, you all would just establish, again, being town and county representative, you would be the ones to establish, your bylaws and, your
Right, if it
members.
was so it'd be an
And name-
authority
and
or
name yourself.
something that's created from scratch, actually. It's
Yes.
not another existing body out there that potentially,
Right,
right?
You
So
this would
you
be something
created
new
from
that you
scratch.
would stand up.
Okay.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Mhm.
If you look at the top 3 or 4 ways in Virginia that they're managed, what's the top? Is it chambers, local government,
It's government.
then?
It
I'm
would
not
be.
asking you for specifics.
Yeah,
just
no,
if you
it would
were-
be government, and then it would be through your Chamber of Commerce, unless you're looking at a regional, the regional tourism. Because sometimes, and particularly like I think about on the Eastern Shore, there are some that there is no local person, there's no local chamber person, there is no local government person. They are, all things they do is funneled through and completed by a regional group, which would be this nonprofit that I mentioned. That is one area of the state that's pretty common, and largely just because of the smaller areas and limited.
How about something like similar to ours?
Yes.
Our area.
So, again, primary, it's predominantly through local government, and then your second would be
Chamber.
the chamber. Yes, sir. Mhm. I mean, like I said earlier, I used the example of the Southwest Virginia. It's 19 counties and 4 cities, and only 3 out of that 23 communities operates as chamber. On all the others are through government. And then here, I've got 12, and there's only 1.
I saw a couple of instances in Virginia where, like in Loudoun County, Middleburg is part of Loudoun County, but they do a Loudoun County visitor thing. And then Middleburg does like a secondary thing, just because it's about horse country and it's very specific to Middleburg. And that is run through a business and professional organization, and it's a membership organization, but it's about tourism, horse tourism for Middleburg, so it's very specific, but they get grants, I think, from the larger entity, and I think that's how they handle it. So I see some like that. So there are examples of people who are destinations, like that's a horse destination, which is a lot more privatized, but it's because they're part of a much larger county. So they have a model like that. Across the country, though, again, chambers are pretty common, which again I was very surprised at. So a lot of the ski areas like Telluride and Aspen and Vail, I believe all have chambers. Denver has a chamber. I think out wine country in California, some of them are chamber related. And again, it's driven on how many. If you're super all about visitors and that's your major industry, you're more likely to have that.
And I would be curious, I mean, I think it would, to take that a step further is to, again, look at how they are actually operating. Yes, they are a chamber, but is there a division separate that is solely for tourism? And also, not to be presumptuous, that the funding model is only by chamber revenue, because in many cases, they are still receiving funding from town and county.
Yeah, so I actually asked that, and I researched that particular question. So in every case, there's a firewall of some sort. There's 2 entities. It's run by the person who runs both the chamber and the visitors. They sometimes have separate bank accounts. Other times they do it through like classes in their financials. So there has to be a lot of transparency between the resources, because it's a private member organization. And in every case, I found it was through the lodging tax. So that's common in other states across. They use the lodging tax to fund their tourism, and in every case, the lodging tax was applied to this entity.
So you, in essence, have an executive director over the
Over
chamber
both,
and tourism,
yeah.
and then separate boards for each.
In some cases, they had one board, but they just made sure the representation was both. In other cases, they had two boards, you know, of the chamber board. It depends on how they grew up and how long it's been in existence. Some cases they had membership for just the chamber, and other cases they had membership also for tourism, and some cases they had it both, and you get like a discount, you know, if you're both or whatever, so you can have combined.
Yeah.
So,
And it could just be the chamber board and then, you know, have a council that would be
yeah,
for tourism.
yeah, a council to
And they would have a marketing committee. Because you do want to make sure that you do want a fair representation from the industries, like your lodging, your you know, restaurants, et cetera. But then also you want to be very, you know, mindful, perhaps particular about, you know, the role that they play and who then is in those positions.
Right.
So like in the instance where you have those boards, you would still perhaps consider standing up a marketing committee, and those would be professionals who are really savvy with marketing and, you know, can help to make those decisions and be a stronger advisory support system for the staff.
Also, in almost every case, like the marketing, there are pieces that are contracted or subcontracted out, and one is website development, not necessarily maintenance, but website development.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and some design work, advertising, and things like that, because you just can't, it's too expensive to have this, right, to have this experts
Well, it can
in-house.
become very expensive too. I mean, to have the budget to be able
Right.
to sustain all of that, and even like with content development. I mean, there's a lot.
Right.
Yes. But-
I mean, for example, how does the Ray Caverns do their advertising, and do they do everything in-house? Do you know that?
Blue Ray Caverns, the caverns themselves,
Correct.
yeah, they have their own photographer, they have
They
their
spend
own
a
marketing
tremendous
person. They
amount
have,
of money on
I mean,
that.
that budget is, yeah, it'll put all of us to shame looking at our budgets.
Correct.
So, but yeah, so again, I mean, it's dictated by
Mhm.
the funds that are available for operations and.
But I think it's very important that when we're discussing things, that we, you know, we have the golf courses, we have the Appalachian Trails, we have the Skyline Drive, we have the Shenandoah River, but, you know, we can't forget about, you know, the mom and pop. We can't forget about the Henry's Groceries, we can't forget about the Apple House, we can't forget about the breweries. So this, like you said, everybody needs a fair shake,
Yeah.
and
And so.
it needs to be represented well.
Absolutely, and so, and then when you're looking at, again, the role that they play, I mean, I think that it could be that you have that representation being those business owners, but sometimes it's certainly not uncommon then that those business owners would say, yes, I will serve on the board or on the council, but if you were to then have a separate, a committee for the purposes of, yes, marketing and advertising, I would like to appoint my marketing person in-house, because just because you're the owner doesn't necessarily mean that, right, that that's your skill set. And so they can make that appointment just by way of their position on the board or on the council.
So on the outsourcing ground rules, you know, I asked a couple of people, and I looked at online, even at some contracts that are out there. Good thing with governments and the contracts right online, so you can see what they're doing. And I was interested how they funded them, whether and whether there was a competitive contract. So the best practice is a competitive contract. However, there's probably going to be one bidder if you do it, you know, which is going to be your chamber. But a lot of them do it, particularly if there's angst in the community, a competitive contract, to see what other options can come available, because again, there are other options out there. The competitive contract, the most common is a 1-year renewable contract based on performance measures. Some have up to 5, some have up to 7, but the most common was a renewable, and that's part of the tourism research. And it's objectively evaluated. There are some that do it through a grant, and that is not necessarily a good way to do it. So they're just granting, and they say, okay, here's a grant, we're gonna just give you the money. It has the most questions from, you know, the taxpayers, and they say, you know, why are you just giving people money versus competing a contract? So that was one of my questions, because I think it's important that it's very transparent, it's performance-based, and there's an RFP associated with it versus, you know, just a grant, which a government can give a grant to, even a performance grant to a nonprofit. So we talked about firewall, a yearly planning with town and county officials, that they actually are involved in the planning sessions themselves. I thought that was another best practice out there, where they go through a tourism planning session, and there's representatives from both the county and the town.
On the board.
Yeah, on the board, and also just for that planning session. So there are more participants, and then quarterly and yearly reporting against plan and metrics. So if we were going down a road like that, we talked about the pluses and minuses of the city. What are the pluses and minuses, let's say, of let's say a chamber one, because that's the one that is we can understand best. The plus of the chamber.
Well, I think again, the accessibility, the accountability, the having people running the program who are actually members of the community. I don't know if there's any other outsourcing option that would be other than that. I imagine there is. I imagine we could just hire a professional marketing company to take,
Right, that's another option.
to take over, and we wouldn't have those pros that we would have with both the options we're looking at now.
Okay. Any other pluses?
I think you're already having representation of a lot of businesses, and you already have those relationships.
I think there's some synergy between like the materials that you have. So I made a point to go into the chamber's offices and pick up, I think you have a brochure in there of some sort, and list the businesses or whatever. And then you have the town/county tourism also has something very similar. So I thought, well, there's some synergies there. We'd have to get around the membership issue of that, but there are some synergies, not a ton of synergies, because the chamber does have a very different mission. But there, from a print perspective, which print is very expensive, there's some synergies. Any other?
If I wasn't born and raised here, I would definitely want to speak to both of them. I think it's a one-stop shop. By having it at the chamber.
Now, so if you were a tourist coming in, because I think this is where I disagree
Correct.
with you guys last week. But if you're a tourist coming in, are you going to stop at the chamber? And no, for me, like I wouldn't even think of that. But that's where I'm from. The chamber isn't. First, I'm going to go to the visitor center.
Yeah.
And most places, destination places, do have visitor centers. But
Yeah, I mean, but you also said you didn't know how many of them were ran by chambers until you started doing
right, I didn't know that.
investigating.
Right. So
But
maybe if
as
I
a-
lived in a place that was
If I
run by
were
chamber,
you, if I were you and I was investing and I wasn't born and raised in this county, in this town,
yeah,
I would definitely want to see both of them.
yeah.
I want to
If
know
you're
what's available
investing,
for my employees
yeah.
before I invest my money. What's available to me and my family, how the schools, what kind of restaurants, what does the area have to offer?
Now that's different. So if you're moving here, or you're starting a business,
And wants to know
that makes
say
sense.
no.
That makes sense to me. But like I'm just driving down from DC and I stop in this cute little town in
Well,
Front
what made you
Royal.
come here?
What made me come here?
Why did you
That's a
invest
long
here?
story.
I know. You're here.
Yeah, I'm here, and it's the most amazing assets here. It's beautiful. I have horses. I love the mountains. I like to hike. The river's here. And what made me invest on Main Street was the amazing potential that this place has that is not yet seen. I think there's so much more potential here, and a historic Main Street asset like that is underutilized. And I think it's beautiful and amazing.
Absolutely.
Well, I think, even if the visitor center is the first stop, that certainly, the connection between the visitor center and the chamber is kind of obvious to us. And if someone were to call Nikki or to call the tourism, the visitor center, and say, hey, I have an employer group, we want to go canoeing, you know, we want an outing. What else do y'all have? I think the immediate connection between the two entities is kind of a no-brainer.
So what you're saying is one of the pluses is the knowledge of exactly what those businesses do. So both entities have to know, all right, this is what, in my case, Front Royal Brewing has to offer. So and that's true. Both of them have to have an inventory of information about both businesses, whether it's for you're moving here, you're investing here, or you have a group coming, no matter which, entry point you come
Exactly.
in.
And in addition to that, I think, as we've talked about in other meetings, there is just so much to be done. The assets in our area are tremendous, and to ask one person to service all of the work, let's just say it's a ton of work to promote everything that we have, that this community has to offer.
So leveraging of the resources is another.
Well, and to be able to have some assistance.
Right.
You know, I'm not just the Visitors Bureau, I have a partner in the chamber.
Yeah.
You know, my counterpart, it's not just, it's more people to work on the same,
Okay.
wavelength and for the same mission.
Okay. All right, downsides? Membership, I think, is a downside. I think perceived conflict, perceived conflict of interest. Because I would worry, we happen to pay our dues for the chamber, but I would worry that you're coming to me and I am a tourism, and I don't belong with the chamber, it's part of the membership, but there's a perceived conflict of interest in terms of the, how you promote me or whatever.
I love butts in the heads. Yeah, sorry.
What's
My
that?
heads are going
I-
behind. Sorry, it's distracting.
Any others? And I think this is true of, there's a lot of synergies in the leverage of resources versus the perceived conflict of interest. There's ways to, pluses and minuses, there's ways to mitigate against any of the downsides of any of these models. And as you said, these models work, you've seen all the models work across the country. All of the models work well. There's some really great best practices. So whether it's a chamber model or not a chamber model, we just, as a board, would recommend how do you mitigate against the downside of that, like separate finances, total transparency, whatever the model is.
Yearly audits.
Yep, yep. Okay, I think that's.
Are we on the right
that's
path?
options.
Yeah, this is, you're off to a good start. Yes, yeah.
So what I thought we could present on Monday, I thought what we could present on Monday is,
Why do we have to present on Monday?
I don't know.
We don't have
It's too
to.
fast,
We don't have
in my
to,
opinion.
at all.
Okay,
Yes.
There's still much more to be talked about.
Yeah, we're not presenting anything.
Okay.
Or I won't be.
all right, so,
I won't be part of it.
okay, so we're not gonna present on Monday, I guess.
No.
It's fine by me.
Yeah.
So I thought in terms of when we get all of our pieces together, we have lots more pieces, I put an outline together. And so I just wanted to run by you guys what I thought could be in our outline. And I'd love it, if you guys have other pieces of research and we could reach out to really understand all the models more. I think we know what our questions are still. And I think you're gonna bring us back some more information in terms of some models there.
Yes, contact information, I believe, for you to do some outreach on your own to
yeah.
other organizations who operate both as a chamber of commerce, and then also, maybe perhaps that did have that structure but are now currently operating under government or vice versa.
Yeah.
And then at your leisure, you can reach out to those individuals and pose some
And ones that
questions.
particularly look like us, because you have some
Right.
towns that are towns and their industry is manufacturing. And that is not their biggest industry. So where the industry, the largest industry is tourism, we are most interested in, I think, because I think we're different in that way.
Yeah. Well, and that's why, I mean, I mentioned Southwestern Virginia a lot, because I mean, you know, that they have hung their hat on tourism.
Yes.
And they, you know, are just continue to invest, and they're doing some amazing things. And so, as I mentioned, there are 3 communities, there that are operating under a Chamber of Commerce. There are some that are actually having the same discussions that you guys are having,
Right.
Bristol being one.
Is there a resource list of companies out there that do this type of thing that we could potentially call?
That can help you to kind of formulate a plan.
If we don't go with the chamber, if we don't go with local government, is there a company, or are there a list of?
Marketing organizations
Correct,
to
that
do
would
the
just,
marketing.
That's
we pay a
another
fee
option,
and they report to us. and-
Do you have
I
any?
know Bath County is currently in a contract with McCullough Harris, and
Okay.
McCullough Harris is they are a marketing, a brand design agency, and they are actually administering the tourism program for that county right now, and, so.
Is that the only one you know that?
We're off the top of my
Doesn't,
head,
doesn't
yes, but they're-
Dario Savarese, doesn't he do City
He
Winchester?
doesn't do necessarily on the lines, I think, of what you're
Okay,
talking about.
okay,
His is
okay.
more,
Well, you know.
Pieces of it,
Yeah.
There are pieces of it. All right,
Yeah.
so if it is a marketing agency, that seems to be the least common of the, so that's another one that's the least common of the 4.
Oh,
where-
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. So, you know, as I mentioned earlier, as far as, for lack of a better expression, like contracting or farming this out, if they're, again, typically, we see that only in regional, you know, in regional work, not in immediate, you know, single locale work. It's not to say that there are not ones that do it, I just can't tell you, I'm not
That's
prepared
the
to tell you
least
today.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's the least popular.
Yes,
In our
absolutely,
situation.
that's right, yes,
Okay.
sir, and.
In Virginia at least.
Yes, right,
Okay.
yeah. So I'm only, just to be very clear, everything I've shared with you today is
Yeah.
only based on,
Yeah.
our work here in the Commonwealth and observation
Yeah.
with our partners. And so, but I will, call Richmond though and see if they don't have a short list. Perhaps they might be able to provide
Just
some
something,
agencies.
So we
that-
give people options.
Yeah,
That's it.
absolutely. Yeah, you're doing your due diligence and I appreciate it.
All right, so for the outline of, the other thing you were gonna get us is how to calculate whether tourism is our number 1 industry or not. And both from an employer, just the contact information.
For
Carrie,
Brandon,
yeah,
for
I
the-
can reach out to Brandon,
Okay,
I can
okay,
reach out to
okay.
Brandon and
Okay, that's great.
ask him from,
BDU.
All right, so
Who's that?
so the Northern Shenandoah Valley Regional Commission.
we can put a lot of information to what we find with numbers behind it, which would be great. And talk about why tourism is important, the dollars it brings in, the assets we have, you know, and some of the ones that I brainstormed, but we could go over this list, is that we're uniquely positioned near major metropolitan areas, 2 transportation corridors, gateway to the Shenandoah Valley, Mile Zero to Skyline Drive and the Shenandoah National Park, George Washington National Forest, Andy State Guest Park, all close to other parks. We have the river, the Appalachian Trail. So we have all sorts of, and just to have a list of those kind of key assets, which are natural assets in a historic Main Street. These are things you cannot recreate.
Right.
These are our natural assets, or not natural assets that have been here a long time. Or the Civil War assets that we have as well, and just the beauty of the area as well. So I thought we could talk about in our presentation why tourism is important, the dollars required to be spent on tourism, which is one of the things that people may not know is that we have to spend money, so tourism doesn't go away. You must spend money on tourism. So 60% of the lodging tax for the county must be spent on tourism. 67% of the lodging tax for the town must be spent on tourism. So for the town, and you probably have the county number, but for the town, it was over $190,000 of last year. 2019 is projected to be a little more next year, this fiscal year. And then the county also has, what's the number?
We were at about 120,000.
Okay.
And then with Marriott coming on, it will be more the next fiscal year.
So probably
I
close
would
to
Is
say
there-
four.
about maybe 50,000.
Is there a breakdown of where that money was spent, line item?
Yes, because the
I think
budgets
that's
are,
important.
yeah, the budgets are,
Because we, you know, I think
We
we need
have
to
all of
really
that,
take
yep.
care of.
we have it both for the county and for the town, yes. And that's a requirement that you know where that money went to.
Exactly.
So then, So again, you have to use that money, so we have to use it in some way. What is tourism, the definition of it, because I think there's interestingly varying definitions of tourism. What are the major functions of tourism? I thought we could talk about who is the tourism board? Who are we and what is our role? What do we, so the fact that we are somebody from the hotel industry, somebody from the golf, some from the brewery, developer from the hotel, from the outdoors, retail and outdoors industry. So who we are and what our role is, what our function is important. The current status of tourism in Warren County and Front Royal, I don't think any of us saw us being in this position in terms of tourism being kind of, put on hold or whatever it was, and somebody removed. But it is, we are where we are. But to say here's where we are and where are the fact that there are 2 budgets, how tourism has been working, and the visitor center, how many employees of the visitor center that we have, which I have as well. What we're concerned about, the Virginia Tourism Commission, the BTC, what they do, and then talk about some of our goals for tourism. And we've talked about that in the last several meetings, what our goals for tourism are, and I just want to really quickly go through those, because if we're going to put this presentation together, I just want to make sure that I caught all the ones that we talked about. So one of them is clearly articulate a strategy in terms of who our customers are, what we have to offer, and what the potential is both economically and qualitatively, and the steps to getting there. So we want, no matter who takes us over, we have to do a better job at a strategy and a plan to get there. Improve the clear use of metrics to understand current performance, progress, and benchmark against best-in-class entities. Shift from dependence on printed advertising, not that it will go away, but to more online social media, to include geo-targeting and geo-fencing, which is you come into an area and you know that you're there, it pops up on your phone. Benchmark and report on engagement levels, website analytics, and conversion rates, and then we do that today, but to actually use that as a performance metric. Include steps to ensure sustainable tourism, where people are in natural areas. You have tourists come in, you don't want them to ruin things. So we have the river, we want to keep the river clean. We have the parks, we want to keep them clean. And so what is our role in sustainable tourism to make sure that people leave no trace? That's very important for our Appalachian Trail community. It's very important for our parks. And so I think we have a big role in that. Leverage town, county, and business funding and resources to get the biggest bang for the buck. This is different than the current state. We really, I think, as a group, don't believe we're getting the biggest bang for our buck, just because it's a little uncoordinated. Yeah. And then leverage Front Royal, not to say that Warren County doesn't go away, but and I'm going to check this with you, but leverage Front Royal as a brand, because sometimes we do competitive Warren County, Front Royal, whatever, so we've said that. Front Royal has a unique advantage that when you're driving down 66, you see Front Royal, Front Royal, Front Royal, and we could really leverage that as a brand. So that's the...
Is there a way to set up a couple planning sessions, or at least one really good planning session? I'm willing to commit.
I think under that too, Carrie, I think we need to clarify our brand. Like we talked about, we're using several different logos and several different taglines, and we really need to pull that in.
And a lot of work has been done this year on that, but to continue that work, I think, because I think really good work has been done by tourism and by the grant group and by you guys even to do that, but to clarify it even more would be good. All right. Any other ones on that? Then lastly, talk about potential metrics, talk about the functions of tourism, and then talk about the 3 options, or 4 options, I guess there's now if you use the marketing organization. And just say, here are the pluses and minuses of those 4 options, and some of that we talked about today. And that would be an extent to what we're going to put forward, kind of our staff work to our taxpayers and to the 2 entities, the Board of Supervisors and the Town Council. Does that make sense? Am I missing anything?
homework.
You guys might want to review your memorandum of understanding, just because there's a lot of a framework in here
Yes.
based on what was agreed upon in 1993 and what was agreed upon in 2017.
Yes, so
You
that
could
is
use
part-
this as a framework and then maybe craft something that is more applicable to the circumstances.
Yeah, that's a great point, and as part of the, who is the board, I was gonna bring up that memorandum of agreement, which is, it's a good starting point, but it's very, I don't think it's served us well in terms of exactly what our role has been. So talk about how to evolve that as well in terms of what the next step is. I think that has to be evolved.
Would it have to be rewritten if it does become a county?
Depends with it, yeah.
Yes.
does.
Yes.
Yeah,
That
that's
should be
what we do,
amended.
right?
Okay.
Any other things that we're missing? We're
Permission to
getting-
speak, I'm not on the committee.
That's up to our chair.
Well, do we want to set a date to meet and talk about all this stuff?
And then we can have,
And then we can ask questions and stuff?
I'd like to have a planning session. I don't want to meet. Let's get some work done.
That's so unlike you, Richard.
I know. We all have things to do.
So we're gonna talk about that afterwards, I guess? So we're not.
We want to set, we can set a date in terms of, let's put a 10-minute date out.
I think that has,
For another meeting like this?
no, I'd rather do a planning session so we can really get down.
Like a
to
half-day planning session?
Whatever it takes.
Having someone come in with a niche market.
Facilitate it.
I think that would be beneficial.
My question was, is there a professional, do we have somebody on staff in either county or town that could run the meeting?
Well, could we do
Yeah.
the
Sure,
drive
I like
tourism?
that.
we could ask VTC,
Yeah,
ask
I
Stephanie
think
if that would be
Yeah.
something in their
Could you do that for us?
suitcase, so to speak.
How about that?
What about the
Do you offer that
drive
service?
tourism? Is that?
Yeah, so
soon?
I'm not sure that you're there yet.
Okay.
But as I said earlier, so that will not be launched until June. So at this
Okay. You need
point,
to
but
put it.
it's imperative though, that's a good kind of guideline though. We're looking at a time, I mean, we're already in March,
Yeah.
halfway through.
Grass is growing.
Yeah, right. And so, the sooner the better to try to get yourselves organized so that in the time that we are prepared then to launch the opportunity that you guys can partake if you are so interested.
Richard, which one are you talking about? Like the bigger
The planning
work or
session.
just
It has
the
somebody
actual
mediate the-
Strategic plan or just
Absolutely.
our option?
No,
That we're
I
gonna
mean,
The options?
the whole thing.
So I think you need
Keep
someone.
us on track
I believe
instead
you
of
need.
bouncing all around, because everybody has great ideas, but we pretty much have a layout.
So for the purposes of right now, just trying to restructure, organize, that is a bit different than what we generally, that is something that it suggests to localities that really does need to be handled at the local level and perhaps with professional services, that's not what tourism do. When you though are organized, we'll come in and facilitate and have community brainstorming and strategizing to develop a tourism plan where you are essentially devising a plan for marketing and product development and those types of things, not looking at the organizational structure and how you are going to function. That's
I think we need to do that sooner versus later. We have individuals whose livelihoods are impacted by that. In the visitor center, we have, we need stability. We have visitors coming in. We need to do that right away. So maybe just a town facility, somebody facilitates.
We could probably find somebody either from North Fairfax or,
Yeah, that'd be good.
yeah, I'm sure we could find somebody at LFCC who could come over and facilitate.
And the point would be to finish this outline,
Yeah, correct.
right? And then that will be our presentation to
Council and.
council, right? And
Develop the
because
structure and then you guys come in?
then they come in to do those
Yes,
plans.
right, yeah. So once you have a structure, you have identified a kind of a main point of contact who is gonna be charged with executing, go ahead.
Right.
Yeah,
No,
then
no,
that's,
no.
so then, we would work with that individual to then start, the planning process and bringing the community together and do the visioning, sessions, et cetera. And then, of course, they would be the one, then it would be your lead and kind of saying, okay, VTC, and putting us on notice that you would be interested in wanting to participate in the Drive, 2.0 programming, et cetera. So right now, the work to be done is, independent or,
So with that initial drive tourism, we were actually the second community to finish that 5 years ago. And we did receive a $10,000 grant. I actually wrote it with Tim Smith at the Visitor Center. We wrote a grant. And that $10,000 has been applied towards the Wayfind and Signage program
Okay.
that we're working through the Community
Well, that's
Development Block
good.
Grant with right now, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to do that right away.
Okay.
So next week sometime, it's gonna be past their time that they wanted us to present, but we can present the next time.
It doesn't do anybody any good for us to rush it. I mean, and get it wrong. Let's get it right.
And when you were kind of listing off all the things that you wanted to include in your presentation
Yeah.
to the boards, I've noted it here, I'll send this in my email. We developed a PowerPoint presentation for the power of tourism, and it speaks to what is tourism, why is it
That's
important,
great.
et cetera, that we shared with our partners
Yep.
some months ago, maybe September-ish.
Yep.
It was early fall or right at the beginning.
I do have some of that, but the presentation would be awesome.
Yeah, so this is a template that has
Yep.
some kind of, and then statewide, I'll include that in that email.
That'd be awesome.
What's the date? What do you want to shoot for?
I can only, next week I can only do Thursday or,
How about Thursday?
but you can move to.
I can't do Thursday, but don't let it hinge on me, because there's enough of
What
you
about
guys.
Friday?
I can't do Thursday, Shenandoah Valley has their thing on Thursday.
Friday?
I have leadership.
Friday.
Excuse me, is he allowed to talk?
In just a minute, we're trying to get the schedule, and then we'll have the audience, we'll let audience questions.
I'm doing today.
Friday. And one thing I want to clarify is everybody in agreement that we are not going to provide a specific recommendation under this board? That what our job is to do the staff work to say, here are the options, pluses, minuses, and are you in agreement with that? Because we're delivering it to you.
So are we gonna do Friday afternoon or morning?
Morning.
One's fine.
Okay.
Morning.
Yep, that's fine.
Gary?
Sounds good.
Is there anything that you would like to see in this presentation that we did not mention?
Either way.
What do you want to do?
Talk.
Get this room.
When we have more than two supervisors together, we can, only two of us can talk.
Right, that's okay.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure. I've heard twice in 2 days that the town and the county had a meeting on the 30th. And I just want to make sure that we're not going to have a meeting together, because I don't believe that y'all will be ready for that.
On the
It sounds
30th.
like there's a lot of conversation that's still going around. And I'd like to tell the mayor, the town administrator, the county administrator, and the supervisors, that we're not gonna have that meeting on the 30th.
Don't you think we could have this, is this enough for that presentation? Because I think we'll have this done by the 30th.
I'm not sure,
Okay.
because my anticipation is we would like to see some dollars associated with this.
Okay,
We know that we've got X amount of dollars so far, and I know the county is willing to put up a few more dollars,
okay,
and I know the county is willing to put up a few more dollars. If we don't put up enough dollars, how are you gonna get your job done?
right,
So it's like, show me what you would like for your budget to be, or what you need to work with,
okay,
and then you can even add what you want, and then we'll tell you what we can do.
okay.
And
Or
I
approximate.
think, huh?
Or an approximate.
Yeah, or an approximate. And I think that we're in very, very close agreement, because me personally, and I wish that Matt had stayed, but I don't believe that he and I are in disagreement that we want the tourism group to be a unified group, not town or county.
Right, I think that.
And that's the way it's gotta be
everybody's-
sung
Yep,
all of the time by everybody that's involved.
Yep, okay.
That's why the joint meeting on the 30th was planned.
David was.
Okay. Sorry, I had a question. So Latasha Thompson with Front Royal Town Council. One, I appreciate you not wanting to rush the process to present to us. Secondly, I was trying to figure out who asked for a presentation on Monday. Who demanded that from you guys?
Oh, for Monday?
For Monday with town council, yes.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Did anybody ask?
Matt Tederick did.
Okay, so I had requested to have to the work session added the visitor center. By the way, I have the budget that you'd like to see, I can email that to you. To have the visitor center, people come in and present, so we had an understanding of everything that happens within that department, how things operate, how we're presented on social media, etc. So that's what I had requested. So that's where I was confused. I asked that you guys be invited and allowed to ask questions at a work session. Typically, that's not a Q&A for everybody, but that's what I asked for you guys to be invited just to listen to. We're all listening to the same information. We're all getting the same details. Because right now, I feel like we're not all getting the same information. So that was the purpose. And I'm really glad that you guys are not rushing to present, because the last thing anybody needs is for a rush decision on something. So I really appreciate it, and I've enjoyed everything that you guys have said, and you had a lot of great questions and good research. Awesome.
And one of the things that you should know is I think a couple of us have spent time with the
Oh,
visitor
yeah,
center.
I'm sure.
Yeah, in fact, I did last week for 2 hours.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
so we do know some of that,
Yes.
which I know is a concern of yours as
Yes.
well, but that's important to us too.
Yeah, I knew that there were people who did have that
Yeah.
information, but I just wanted all eyes.
Yep, no, I
Same
think
thing.
that's important.
Yeah.
They're very important.
So that's still gonna happen?
Yes, the visitor center presentation, yes, it's still going to happen 16th, yes.
Very briefly, Dave Downs, I think everybody in the room knows me. Very informative meeting, I learned a lot. Illustrates why this is a complex issue that cannot be rushed. Agree with the consensus around the room. There's an elephant in the room that nobody seems to want to address, and that is on January 29th of this year, the director of tourism for the town was terminated. There were a lot of projects in momentum, a lot of things in planning, budget already approved for that person to do work, and they're gone. I have a short-term temporary proposal, which I'm sure you may find some great holes in, which I'm more than glad to hear, but that would be the following. Go along with the city plan for now under the auspices of this group, which is a combination of the town and county already per the agreement, which I've read over with a fine-tooth comb. It brings together 3 representatives from the town, from the county, 1 from lodging from each, 3 statutory representatives, 1 who's no longer existing. In any event, have this group oversee an individual till July 1st, which is the budgeted year that the town has already approved the money for. I know a person who's already willing to come in and fill that position as an executive director working for this group till July 1 for the same price that she was paid by the town up until she was terminated on January 29th, and that's Felicia Hart. And I got her blessing on this. It would require the approval of both the town and the county to amend that agreement, do that. This group, I have all the confidence in the world that could oversee her. They have the ability to hire and fire. This is only until July 1st. Gives us some breathing room to figure out what we're going to do. This is a serious issue that affects all of us in this community. And by the way, I've run a whole lot of board meetings, and this is tourism. I am thinking tourism as vacation, fun time, happy. But I know it's a serious topic, and I appreciate the diligence that many of you put into examining all these complex models. As you pointed out, it seems like the Virginia model represented is the city, and there could be a whole lot of reasons for that. But be that as it may, we need time to figure that out. But in the meantime, there is some urgency that some people seem to be downplaying. We've got a bunch of factors going on, coronavirus, we got all kinds of things that are going to adversely affect tourism. We need somebody to help you in your capacity supplement and continue forward with the momentum that we spent so much time putting together. And now it's just been, the rug's been pulled out from underneath us. I talked to Matt Tederick about this. It's unfortunate he's left. He wasn't completely adverse to it, but he can't speak for the entire town council. This is a resolution that would need to be passed by both the county and the town real quickly so that we can bring her back. Oh, and by the way, just for fun, I've got office space for her already. It cost you guys $1. And it's much nicer than the little closet that she had over in the town hall. That's all.
I'd like to address that. So I love Felicia, and that's one of the reasons I built where I built, and because I went to see her, and I thought, she did a great job. I think that question is an HR question. It's not necessarily the question of this council. That's great if she could come back and help. There is a void here. It is a void created by a manager and somebody who they have removed. I don't think that's in our purview to be able to bring an individual back, nor understand the, the complexity of doing that in terms of the memorandum of agreement and whatever would have to happen. So I think that is something that you need to talk to Matt about.
To be clear, the proposal would be, it would be open contract, so that it wouldn't necessarily be Felicia, although I think her resume is going to be pretty good compared to whoever else comes up,
Right.
at least for the short term.
Right.
So,
okay.
so I understand that.
Yeah. I don't think we're opposed to an open contract, somebody coming back and stabilizing things, because we recognize there's no question we recognize that there are problems with that, and we're impacted by those problems. But again, that we are not the fiduciary, we don't have fiduciary responsibility.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. It is the town that has that, and it was a removal of an individual in the staff department, so, and an agreement between the county and the town. So that's kind of where I think, at least I am, I don't know how you guys think about that, but that's,
I don't think we're in a position to discuss
Yeah.
that right now.
The authority to.
yeah,
Or have the authority, correct?
right.
And I'm behind you too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Shut up about the same time. My name's Joanne Carney. I actually am a visitor at the visitors, or a volunteer at the visitor center. They did not ask me to attend this meeting. I'm speaking, as an individual, as a private citizen. But a couple of things I wanted to mention. VATSIG.org is where you will find the items for certification as a Virginia Tourism Center.
Thank
So
you.
if you just want to look that up. I commend you all for waiting and using prudence on that, for saying that you're really not at the place where you can make recommendations, that there's a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of things that came up during the presentation here that you recognize that you need some answers for before you can move forward. There is one thing that I really can't seem to figure out, and maybe it's in this, what is the paper called, the Memorandum of Agreement or Understanding or something. But I fail to see why a member from the remaining staff cannot be, even as a non-voting member, present in this committee on a regular basis to give you feedback, to tell you what is going on when you have some of these questions. I know I can answer them. I know one of them, Tim or Megan or Debbie, or one of them could answer these questions. I don't understand why they're not here.
Can I answer that question too? I think it's very similar to David's request. That is, we don't make up our own membership. The membership is appointed by the, and I put a resume in, I was appointed by the town, other people were appointed by the county, and I think that's a fine idea. Usually when the individual isn't there, there's an interim or it's their boss that would then cover them, and so either an interim or boss would be great. That's why Felicia was a member of this, because she did provide that information. We're at a loss for some of that information. We don't even know what happened to, some of the commitments that were made. We don't know. So that would be great, but again, I think that's something that you could request of Matt, who is her boss, and he would be, he would be the interim without her. So.
Well, I know at the
Or he
establishment.
would name an interim.
The establishment I came from, which was the Fairfax County government, I worked at the Park Authority. When a supervisor was unavailable to attend some of the committee meetings, they would pull from lower ranks. They didn't have
That's
to
right.
do-
So that, but
Yeah,
it's that
so-
person pulled from lower rank.
No, the
who just-
supervisor chose.
yeah. Right. So that's
it
we're
was-
open to that. We'd love that. But
And lastly, I would just encourage, if you haven't been down there, we do cross-pollinate all the time. We get new people that are looking to resettle in Front Royal and people that are looking to open businesses, and we absolutely share information about the town and the county, and we share Chamber of Commerce information. We absolutely cross-pollinate. If you haven't been there, please come down there and visit and see a lot of the changes we've made.
That's good to hear. It is.
Yeah, we really, really do. I mean, we're your ally. We're not adversarial. We're your ally. We're there to help this town and this county succeed.
do you think visitors go the other way, that they start at the chamber?
That has not been my experience.
Okay. So
I
that's-
can't say that across the board, but it's not been my experience, that they start up with us, and
Okay,
we will send them to the chamber, we give new residents
but you don't see ones
chamber
referred to you?
information. No, I haven't seen a lot of people that come in and say, I went to the chamber first, and,
Okay.
Well, and some of that happens, just if I could speak to that, not advocating one way or the other,
Right.
but we have a lot of the same materials in our
Right,
office
right.
for that reason.
Yeah.
So the folks who visit us, they do get a visitor's guide, and, we talk about the community, and a lot of what we get are phone calls. And again, just like you said, I would encourage folks, especially folks who are sitting against the wall, to come to the chamber office. We'd be happy to have you come hang out with us for a little bit to sort of get a feel for what, what's going on in there too. So that door is always open.
One last thing, I can save you a little bit of work on making your list of things to do, because we actually already have a visitor's guide that really gives a pretty comprehensive list of things to do in Virginia.
And that's the visitor's guide I'm talking about.
Right.
We stock those.
Right, so when
we
you're
stock
saying
those in our office.
a list of resources, you won't have to do your homework all afresh, there's one
Yes.
shop stopping for that right there.
We have all of that, by the way.
Okay.
So, yep.
Yeah.
And then, before David spoke, I was thinking that this was a great meeting in terms of long-term strategic planning, but what I didn't hear is what do we do in 2020? And I'm sorry, I'm Lisa Jenkins, run Mountain Home Bed and Breakfast, I'm part of the AT committee, there's a lot of you here. So the short-term plan is what I'm concerned about right now because I didn't hear it addressed today. And no matter who helps guide that, we need someone to guide it.
Right.
And to move forward on those projects that were happening. I don't have as defined as suggestion as David has, but I do think that that would be a wonderful thing for this board to work on quickly and not to say, we don't have time, we can't do that right away. I think that the 2020 plan needs to be implemented quickly.
Anybody else? We're not used to big
I'm Paul Gabbert. I'm just a concerned citizen. I like some of what I've heard here. I don't agree with the Chamber of Commerce having it. They had it several years ago. They lost money. They had to give it to town, took it back. I don't think the Chamber should have it. David, I agree with everything you said. I agree with what you said. I agree with what you said. One person tore this place apart. Why can't everybody get together, the council, everybody sitting at this table, every business owner in this town get together, sit down with Mr. Tederick and say, put the damn thing back together the way it was. Because it ran, it worked, she knew what she was doing. Felicia Hart was a professional at her job. She knew everything she was doing. We had a wonderful with her, what she did. This whole thing is ridiculous. We shouldn't even be sitting here talking about this.
Is there a question that you have for us?
Yes, why
I think
can't
we know where you stand.
Why
so-
can't we get together with Matt Tederick and have him, and require him to hire back Felicia Hart and put things back together the way it was?
Okay.
You can meet with them. This is a separate organization. This is a joint tourism committee. And we're sitting here trying to work on the future.
That was my
The
question.
past is
Okay.
what you need to do.
I don't know if we can answer this is probably not the organization that can answer that question, but we appreciate your question.
I'd like to say, I'm Sandra Charles, and my husband and I own Lackawanna Bed and Breakfast in Riverton. And your passion about what we have in our area is what I would love to see marketed. And whatever we get, we need somebody that has that feeling about the mountains, the river, the beauty of our town, because that's really our destination. And we don't have the places that you talk about were destination places, then the smaller businesses benefited from people going to see that destination. But our destination is our environment, the beauty of the mountains and the river. I really hope that whatever you all do in tourism, that you can find somebody that feels that and can promote that. And I don't know if Felicia was responsible for the things that come up on Facebook about what's in Virginia now, but it comes up every every other day, and I post that on my Facebook, and it's things that are related to what's here, so that's a very good marketing skill.
Thank you. You know, I think one of the things I saw best practice is storytelling in terms of what is your story. And one of the things people like when they're tourists is not to go to a place and it to be kind of a cold place, but to feel like they live there too, and that they understand the story. And so tourism is much about, you know, me identifying as if I live there and understanding how people that live there, why they love it so much.
But when you said why you came here, that's exactly the way we felt. We've been coming up here since the 60s to hike and camp, and then 20 years ago we bought this old house, and it's just beautiful. People need to know that. We have a lot of European visitors that come because Dulles Airport, and they want to see Skyline Drive. They're very impressed in the area that we have.
And the authenticity here and the lack of pretense here is amazing.
And we always get reports.
For good or bad.
And we always get reports back about how friendly people are, and that's most important too. That's why the visitor center, I think, is such an asset too, because it's there.
Thank you.
May I just say, yes, I'm Joni Kay, and I have the other bed and breakfast here in town, the Woodward House. And we've been here for 28 years. But now I'm finding that when you come into Front Royal, I went to the chamber. I didn't go to the visitor center, and I should have went to the visitor center. But the new directory I agree with everything. The whole town is beautiful, and our guests come here for that as well. But there's no more map of in town. There's nothing about a restaurant. There's no map about get ice cream. There's no map in town about the arcade, the movie center. So when my guests walk into town, I have to give them individual brochures. And instead of the one wonderful brochure of last year that had the center of town and all the businesses. We know what's on the outside. The whole town, people come here from Europe, just like Sandy said, I add to hers that that's all true. But we're moving away from in town. We're no longer saying people are coming to Front Royal to have fine dining or to have a good experience at a bed and breakfast. We're centering on the outskirts, and we're losing the old town feel. We now have, I love Billy's Brewery, but we now have it right in the town. I'm in town, and I'm not even listed in the town brochure except our name.
I think
There's
that
a
goes
lot we offer.
I think that goes both ways. I'm not trying to interrupt you at all, but there was a lot of emphasis prior on downtown. I'm not a downtown. I'm just saying, it's going both ways. I don't think there was a good community coverage.
So you're saying,
I think Apple House is an icon, and it was capitalized on. It's always been. I love the Apple House. And as a matter of fact, I always tell your dad, when I was a real young girl, I used to come up when your grandparents had it, and when your dad was little. So I think to me, I feel like you're part of town. I don't think of you
But I
as
can tell you
Skyline
that there's a lot of
Drive.
people that don't come to me because I'm not in town.
so what you're saying is, I think what you're saying is, of all the assets, a historic downtown is one of the assets. There's
It's
other
just
assets
one of the
outside of
assets.
town. It just wasn't.
Well, I think that's what
Okay.
this
It
board
needs to be
is
about the community.
comprised of. That's why we're gonna fight for you, we're gonna fight for the Henry stores, we're gonna
Well,
fight
yeah,
for
I'm
Shenandoah
not-
Valley Golf Club,
Yeah.
which is as far out of town as you can get. Okay, it's been there since 1785.
Yeah, my husband
Okay.
golfs all the time, but
So-
I'm adding to all that. I'm just adding to it.
I think you have to.
Along
You
with
have to
that.
add, that's part of the
Yes,
nostalgia of this entire area.
Yeah, I mean,
It's not just
I'm
about
looking
downtown, it's
around
about
at different
everybody.
places that are in town, so, I'm one of them.
I'm Scott Turnmeyer Photography and Turnmeyer Galleries. A lot of people think I'm the new guy on the block because I just opened the gallery. Down on South Street, I've actually been around for a very long time. So One thing I'm known for, and Nikki can clearly say, as well as other people's on here, as well as Delores and Natasha, is I'm extremely passionate about this subject, extremely passionate about it. I love this area very, very much, and as a photographer, I've traveled this country. So I'm gonna commend you. You are spot on with Sedona and Asheville, and I'd also recommend check out Springdale, Utah, right at the base of Zion National Park, because that's the one that I consider us to be almost identical to.
And
right?
Bozeman, Montana. Too,
Yes,
another one.
exactly. Just outside of a national park, all the national resources there. This isn't rocket science. All these other communities have done this already. We're not reinventing the wheel. We should learn from these communities, visit these communities, Skype calls with these communities, just like bringing her in. She's an expert in the area, right? Talk to them. We don't have to do it all ourselves, right? But I agree, it's all metrics, 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 data, data, data. I've worked at Amazon, I've worked at VeriSign, big internet companies over the years. That's what it's all about. The decisions on this advisory council are easy when you have data to look at.
Right.
It's not difficult at all, but you have to have executive sponsorship on all of that stuff.
Right.
No one's going to pay attention to the data unless someone's making people pay attention to the data, right? And then in the community, we have to rely on that data. We can't be upset because one person got let go because we like that person. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm saying it's about a business. We are a business here. It's about a business. We are here to make everybody profitable, to make the community the best that it can possibly be. That's what it's about. Do we like making these hard decisions? No, none of us like to make those hard decisions. But those decisions are extremely important to make it the best that it can be. Now, I will honestly tell you, I think Front Royal has a lot more potential than what we've seen. So whether it was done correctly or incorrectly, if you look at Sedona, if you look at Springdale, they've been in those areas for many, many, many years, just like us. We are light years behind what they do tourism-wise. So I'm telling you, we were not doing it correctly, and now is the perfect opportunity to turn it around and move it in the right direction. So I commend you guys on taking your time and doing it, but I also recommend putting milestones. You gotta have dates. You can't just say, don't do the 30th date. If you're gonna say that great, make another date right after that, because if not, the can's just gonna keep getting kicked down the road. So that's it.
Hi, I'm Mike McCarthy. I'm with the Blue Ridge Shadows Golf, the Holiday Inn and Lands. I think everything that I've experienced today, just being a newcomer, happy to be the new guy, is, you know, it's wonderful. You all are putting a rudder back on a boat that got knocked off in a storm, and I think that you all have got a lot to be proud of. Thrilled about the area. Everything that everyone has said here is true. There's so much to market, and oddly enough, I've worked in many of the markets that you're talking about, the Asheville's, et cetera, of this world. Just as a potential resource for you, because you all seem to be very good at doing your digging and your researching, is the Destination Marketing Association International. It's in Northern Virginia, the home of the Mecca of associations. A friend of mine actually worked for the Association of Associations there, and I'm not kidding.
There is one.
Yes, there is. But they represent that organization happens to represent over 658 conference and visitors bureaus, et cetera. And if anyone is going to know, in addition to the guidance that we're getting through the team here, it's going to be them as far as structure.
Yes.
What do these boards look like? Reporting, accountability. You know, my mind, all I want to see from you all, or what I would love to see in addition to everything else, is I need an org chart. What does this look like? Who is responsible to who? You know, what does each position, if paid, make on average so that you can attract the right talent, whether we had it, we don't have it, whatever, don't care, you know, to attract that right talent in there. Another thing for you to turn around and measure some success, please get in touch with Smith Travel Research. In the industry, it's called STAR. You can buy for practically very little. As an entity, they will not sell to individuals, so nobody can turn around and just say, hey, I want to know about this. But they can sell to you a variety of reports that will give you an idea as far as that accountability. Are we growing? Are we shrinking? I will tell you now, since the last of Q2, Shenandoah has been shrinking by 6% in tourism. And again, to add to the sense of urgency to do something now, we're down, we're still trending down. Okay? 4% in occupancy, 2% in average spend. Okay? So we need to get back onto the boat, start paddling our canoe and really make sure that that rudder gets reaffixed quickly, whoever or however it is. That's really about it. Just as some tools, maybe to give you some assistance.
Thank you.
So.
Anybody else? Thanks so much.
Thank you.